Today we're going to be taking all of the Origin SMP based powers and comparing them in a tier list. Of course, the core ones that we're going to be focusing on in today's video are the ones that are currently in use by players in the Origin SMP. And of course we're going to be ranking them all of them from S to F tier depending on how good I believe they are. But before we get into this video, there's a lot of new people watching right now and highly appreciate it if you're new around here, hit the subscribe button down below and also hit the like button, helps the video do better in the algorithm. But let's actually get into it. So we're mostly going to be ranking these power-ups based on their actual power abilities, the cons and pros to these abilities, rather than the people who are currently playing as these origins. So of course the ranking of these origins aren't actually related towards the people who are currently playing, but more of the pros and cons of them itself. Either way, let's get started with the very first one in the selection here, the B origin. The B origin is by far one of the most intriguing origins that I know of, considering that you have the ability to fly with something similar to a controlled levitation effect, as well as the fact that any damage that you deal also poisons the person that you attack. It leads the B to be a very potent foe to fight in the Origin SMP, as well as the interesting ability to regen your health as well as fill up your hunger bar by being near flowers is definitely a handy ability within and of itself. But unfortunately the rain and nighttime do end up being a very big con to your abilities, as when flying around in the rain you'll be slowed down by a drastic amount, as well when you're outside at night you'll also be slowness and weakness given to you regardless if you're flying or not. And if it's raining and it's nighttime and you're flying, well then albeit you'll be one slow person. Overall, I still like the entire idea behind the B origin and do find it to be a fairly decent origin overall, so I'm going to put it into the B tier. Next up we have the Blazeborn origin, which is definitely an interesting origin from the get-go, with fire becoming your favourable asset. When you're on fire you deal extra damage, as well as you're just immune to fire and lava damage just outright. The Blazeborn allows you to have some pretty enjoyable pros, but unfortunately the cons that go with it do kind of counter it completely. First off, you initially spawn in the Nether, which is a far more difficult starting point than the overworld, as well as the fact that any form of water, including rain, will harm you and burn you as a Blazeborn origin. The immunity to poisons and hunger debuffs do sweeten up the deal a little bit when it comes down to the Blazeborn origin, but that still leaves a lot to be desired with some potential oversize that might come with it, leading me to rank the Blazeborn origin into the C tier. Moving on, we have the Avian origin. The Avian origin is based after a chicken, so you have permanent slow falling whenever you fall down anything, meaning that fall damage is non-existent. Another beautiful pro of this origin is the fact that you move slightly faster when you're rolling around just on your own. But this is then countered by a somewhat logical con where you cannot eat any form of meat, limiting your access to some of the best foods in the game. As well as the fact if you go up to higher altitudes you'll potentially need to actually go to sleep. Ultimately there isn't too many good things with the Avian origin, and it's ultimately extraordinarily basic and lackluster with everything that it comes with, making me put it into the D tier. Moving on, we have the Avian origin, which is honestly by far one of my favorites within the Origin SMP. The origin straight off the bat allows you to have natural elytra wings from the very moment you spawn, which, come on, it's literally elytra wings from the very beginning of the day. What more can you want out of an origin rather than that? Going into even more detail here, you also have the ability to launch yourself up into the air every 30 seconds, which is absolutely cool, as well as the ability to deal double damage when you're flying around, so flying PvP becomes not only more fun, but more scary for the people at the other end of it. But there of course has to be a couple of cons that comes with this. First off, you can only wear lighter armor, aka chainmail or weaker. Gold armor is technically speaking weaker armor than chainmail, but it's heaviest armor in the game, but that's a whatever moment there. But the increase in kinetic damage that you will take is definitely one of the most interesting parts of this origin, considering you'll be mostly flying a majority of the time, meaning that you really don't want to actually hit anything because it's going to hurt a whole lot more than what it would with normal elytra flight in the late game. But overall I do think the elytra's pros way outweigh the cons of it, and making me put it into the A tier. Moving on, we have the Enderin origin, which has got the simple pro of the simp ability of being able to teleport using ender pearls when you don't even have any. Which, let's be real here people, this is quite a useful ability to have. As well as with the inclusion of the ability to reach slightly further than the normal Minecraft player can, as well as placing blocks slightly further as normal too. Of course, the natural cons that come with this is water and pumpkins which hurt you or you're afraid of, which that's only logical when it comes down to an Enderin, leading me to rank this beautiful origin into the B tier. Moving swiftly on through, we've got the Merlin Origin, which by the way would be an amazing solo origin to use, mainly due to the fact that it allows you to see better underwater, breathe underwater, break blocks underwater like you would on land, as well as increase movement speed underwater, like pretty much useful things to use for underwater gameplay. With of course the con of the ability that you have to hold your breath when you're above water. It allows for some really cool and creative ideas when it comes down to building, but the biggest side effect of this is you're unable to enjoy time and with friends in the other origins if you're unable to get yourself some water breathing potions or a turtle helmet or maybe both. Overall, it's a really interesting con that essentially just flips the nature of the world, meaning that you're more of a fish rather than anything, making me put the Merlin tier into the C tier. Moving on, we've got the Spirit Fox origin, which is essentially just the improved version of the Fox origin in the original version of the origins. Essentially give you the abilities of the Fox, permanently increasing your speed, higher jump, and do not take fall damage, as well as bonus storage within your mouth. The only cons of this stuff in which is the ability you cannot hold a shield, you will get hungry super fast, and you also have a reduced health. But overall, this won't actually outweigh the pros of this, being that the Fox origin has so many different benefits to it that make it pretty useful, allowing you to put it into the B tier. The next origin of choice is the Inkling Long, and yes, I'm representing it as the Anvil because that's what the original mod chooses to represent that origin as. Let's just go for it. Essentially, the Inkling origin gives you the quarter of the size of the normal human Minecraft player, which allows you to do some really sneaky things, as well as being a lot more difficult to attack when you're in battle. You're also immune to kinetic fall and cactus damage, as well as the ability to climb up the side of wall surfaces. But of course, being a smaller player, you deal 66% of the total damage that a normal player would. You also move slower and you have slightly smaller jumps. This is counteracted by the fact that you can just climb up anything, as long as you have a less block range in comparison to the normal player. Overall though, this origin is very well balanced and doesn't have too many bad things about it that allows you to have a bit of fun, leaving me to put it into the C tier. Moving on to the Phantom Origin. The Phantom Origin gives you a phantom state that you have the ability to switch in and out of. Being within this state will consume your hunger bar far faster than being out of this state. It provides some pretty good benefits by allowing you to walk through solid blocks while in this phantom state, as well as being invisible to most things. The massive con of which though is that you will burn in daylight if you are not within the phantom state when you're outside of a room. Of course, this logically makes sense as a con to the Phantom. I do feel like that it really provides no really big benefits to any things in the grand scheme of things, making me put it into the C tier as well. Moving into the Slimekin origin, this is definitely a really fun origin to play around with. There's not exactly much too OP with this origin, but just the perks and cons to this make it a super fun origin to play around with, especially the fact that each time you get killed, as long as the cooldown of the said ability is on effect, you will actually shrink down a little further, with the potential ability to go indefinitely to the point where you're unable to be hit back, but you can do all the harassment that you could choose to. Of course, the con is that you have increased exhaustion, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really spoil the fun too much. You get to enjoy the hell out of pissing people off when you get murdered, because you're smaller and more annoying to kill, leaving me to put this origin power into the S tier just because it would be a sheer buttload of fun to play around with a bunch of friends. Moving on to the Starborn origin, it's definitely by far one of the most powerful origins within the collection that are used so far, with not too many cons that actually defect the effect of just these overpowered abilities in the get-go. The ability just to simply explode and cause a lot of damage to the surroundings around you, similar in vein of a supercharged creeper when you get killed. The ability to launch yourself up into the air a fair distance, most likely immobilizing yourself when you land. This is definitely the overpowered origin in the Origin SMP, but it's definitely a fun one at the same time to use, making me put it into the A tier. It's not the best of the best just because it's a bit overpowered, but it's definitely a fun one to use when it comes down to it. Leaving us last but not least with the Arachnid origin that comes with Schlatt. And honestly, me personally, I believe this is probably the most underpowered origin aside from the human origin within the Origins collection. With only having the pro of climbing up the wall as well as adding cobwebs when you attack people, with some major cons is like you lose 3 of your hearts as well as you can only eat meat as your main food source. This origin ultimately leaves it a lot to be desired when it comes down to it, ultimately leaving me to overall rank this worse as the chicken or the avian origin and put it into the F tier. Anyhow, that is officially the best Origin SMP power tier list that you'll ever see, and no one else is going to make anything along these lines. Link below for the tier list itself so you can make yourself one. But I'm your host, Cruiser. Make sure to smash like and smash subscribe down below. And until next time, guys, I'm going back to the dark place which I once came. Anyway, goodbye.